Greetings, fellow seekers of slumber. You've journeyed through the familiar lands of Middle-earth. You've witnessed the courage of hobbits, and you have felt the looming shadow of Sauron. But what if I told you that all of that was merely the end of the story? Forget the third age of men and elves for a moment. We must go back further, to a time of myth and cosmic creation, before the first sunrise, before the very mountains had settled. This is a history of gods who sang the world into existence, and of a darkness so profound it makes Mordor seem like a passing shadow. You are about to witness the original, cataclysmic war that scarred the very soul of the world, setting in motion a tragedy so vast that Frodo's quest was but its final, fading echo. Tonight, I will be your guide on this journey to the very beginning. But before we depart for that forgotten age, let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It is always so fascinating to see all the corners of the world from which you gather. Now, settle in, take a deep breath, and let us return to the dawn of time. You find yourself standing on the edge of nothing, a place of immense, swirling potential before the world even began to be. Then, from the very heart of the timeless emptiness, came a sound, a sacred harmony, born from the thought of Iluvatar, the One. Imagine the grandest symphony you've ever heard, but infinitely more vast, more pure, more alive. This wasn't just music, it was creation itself, sung into being. You watch as the Aina, the Holy Ones, the first spirits born of Iluvatar's thought, enter this grand song. They are beings of incredible power and beauty, each one contributing their unique voice, their own melody, to the unfolding theme. The music swells, rising and falling in intricate patterns, shaping the very fabric of existence. You see them like immense, shimmering forms, weaving their parts into the cosmic tapestry. Some are gentle, their notes like soft winds and flowing water. Others are mighty, their voices resonating with the strength of mountains and the depth of the earth. It is a concert unlike any other, where every note is a brushstroke on the canvas of reality. As the music continues, it begins to take on form. The initial pure melody, the Ainulindalb, starts to solidify, to become something tangible. You see the first faint outlines of the world, ardor emerging from the ethereal notes. It is a slow, majestic process, like watching a magnificent sculpture being carved from pure sound. The Aina pour their essence, their very being, into this creation, shaping it with their song. Some focus on the depths of the earth, crafting mighty roots and hidden veins of precious stone. Others tend to the expansive sky, painting it with swirling clouds and the first hints of distant stars. Still others smooth out the vast basins that will one day hold oceans, or raise the initial, colossal mountains that touch the nascent firmament. It's a truly collaborative effort, everyone playing their part in this divine orchestra. The music deepens, grows more complex, and you can sense the immense power flowing through this act of creation. It is a feeling of being present at the very beginning of everything, witnessing a foundational event that will ripple through countless ages. The landscape forms under your very gaze, a world slowly solidifying from the song of the divine. There's a certain irony in seeing such mighty beings, older than time itself, essentially singing a planet into existence, isn't there? It's far more impressive than whistling while you work, but probably just as exhausting. You can almost feel the vibrations of their voices shaping the very ground beneath your feet, turning the abstract into the concrete, setting the stage for all that is to come. As the grand symphony of creation unfolded, and the world began to take its shape, a discordant note, sharp and unpleasant, began to intrude upon the harmony. This was the work of Melkor, one of the most powerful of the Aina, a being of immense potential, but also of deep pride and a desire to create things solely from his own mind, rather than cooperating with the vision of Iluvatar. You can almost feel the chill in the air, a subtle wrongness that seeps into the fresh, forming world. While the other Valar and Maya poured their love and constructive effort into shaping ardor, preparing it as a dwelling for the children of Iluvatar, Melkor worked to mar and twist it. Imagine a master builder meticulously crafting a beautiful house, and then a rogue element comes along, trying to tear down the walls or pollute the very foundations as they are being laid. That's essentially what Melkor was doing, throwing his own destructive themes into the grand song, trying to introduce fire where there should be calm, or ice where there should be warmth. His shadow, vast and cold, began to fall over the newly formed lands. While the other Valar, led by Manarg, strove to create beauty and order, Melkor delighted in chaos and destruction. You see him, not as a physical being yet, but as a vast, dark presence, swirling like a storm cloud over the emerging continents. He would raise terrible mountains only to cast them down, or create scorching deserts where verdant plains were intended. It was a constant battle of wills, a cosmic tug of war where the very terrain itself was the rope. The other Valar worked diligently to counteract his malicious intent, trying to heal the wounds he inflicted upon the world, or to redirect his destructive energies into something less harmful. It was a bit like trying to bake a cake while someone keeps throwing in salt and mud. You can try to salvage it, but it's never quite as pure as it should have been. Melkor's influence wasn't just physical, it was a deep, spiritual corruption. He sought to bend the very essence of the world to his will, to make it serve his own twisted vision rather than the harmonious plan of Ilúvatar. He scattered his power and being into the very fabric of Arda, making it inextricably linked to his malice. This meant that evil wasn't just an external force, it was woven into the very dirt, the rocks, and the winds of the world. Something that would cause trouble for ages to come, like a persistent, unpleasant smell that just wouldn't go away. This was a foundational problem, one that would cause countless sorrows and shape the destiny of every living creature for millennia. His very being was a testament to unchecked pride, a refusal to acknowledge any authority higher than his own. He was the universe's most stubborn teenager, just with universe-shaping powers. The contrast between Melkor's destructive path and the creative love of the other Valar was stark. Old, the great smith, labored to create the deep places of the world, shaping metals and stones with immense skill. Varda, the Lady of the Stars, painstakingly collected the silver dew from the misty air to create the first stars, setting them in the sky like glittering jewels. Yet, for every act of beauty, Melkor had a counter. If Varda lit the stars, he would try to cast shadows over them. If Old forged a strong mountain, Melkor would seek to tear it apart with internal fires. It was an exhausting cycle, a cosmic game of whack-a-mole, only with much larger stakes and far more dramatic consequences. This ongoing struggle, this initial cosmic conflict, embedded a deep tension into the very bones of the world. It meant that even in its earliest days, Arda was a place of both immense beauty and underlying darkness. The ripples of Melkor's discord would be felt through every age, influencing events, tempting hearts, and perpetuating cycles of conflict. It sets the stage for all the great tales of heroism and tragedy that are to come, like a dark undercurrent beneath a seemingly calm sea. And you, watching this unfold, realize that the story of Middle-earth isn't just about heroes and villains. It's about the very nature of creation itself, and the eternal struggle between light and shadow. In the immediate aftermath of the War of Wrath, the other Valar, led by the mighty Old, the Smith, turned their attention to shaping Arda into a beautiful and habitable realm. Their greatest creation in this early age was not a mountain range or a vast ocean, but something far more wondrous, the two trees of Valinor. Imagine two colossal trees, radiating light, growing on a green mound named Izelohar, located outside the city of Valimar. These were Telperion and Loralin, the silver and gold trees, and they became the primary source of light for the entire world. This was before the sun and moon, you understand, so their light was pure, untainted, and utterly vital. Telperion, the older of the two, shimmered with a pale silver light, like moonlight caught in a spider web, but infinitely brighter. Its leaves were dark green, and from its branches dripped dew that was collected by Varda, the queen of the stars, and stored in great vats for the stars. It produced a single silver flower, which opened and grew continually. Laurelin, on the other hand, blazed with a golden light, warm and radiant, like sunshine condensed into living form. Its leaves were green like the new spring shoots, edged with gold, and its golden flowers continually spilled bright dew, which awed the smith collected. The cycles of their light defined the days of Valinor for 7 hours. One tree would slowly fade as the other waxed in brilliance, until for a single hour, their lights mingled in a soft, ethereal twilight. Then, for another 7 hours, the dominant tree would fade as the next waxed, before meeting again for another hour of blending light. It sounds complicated, doesn't it? Almost as intricate as trying to figure out which side of the bed gets the most sunlight in a badly designed hut. The Valar poured their love and power into these trees, for they were the very heart of Valinor, the blessed realm where the Valar made their home. You can picture the incredible beauty of it all, the golden glow illuminating the land, casting long, dancing shadows, and the silver shimmer creating a serene, almost dreamlike atmosphere. It was a place of perfect harmony, a stark contrast to the shadowy disruptions that Melkor had tried to inflict upon the wider world. The trees were not merely a light source. They were a symbol of the Valar's dedication, their unwavering commitment to cultivating life and beauty despite the lurking darkness. They sustained all life within Valinor, from the smallest blade of grass to the mighty Valar themselves. The very air around the trees must have been filled with a soft, warm hum, a quiet energy that vibrated with life. Every drop of dew gathered from their leaves was precious, containing the very essence of light. Varda, the Queen of the Stars, used the dew from Telperion to create the stars in the sky, setting them like jewels against the vast darkness. Ald, the Great Smith, treasured the golden dew from Laurelin. Though its specific use isn't detailed, you can imagine it was for something equally magnificent. These trees were a constant, visible reminder of the pure, uncorrupted creative power of the Valar. You could practically sunbathe in their light, though you'd probably end up with a silver tan on one side and a golden tan on the other. A bit like getting 2 different flavors of ice cream at once, but for your skin. The existence of the 2 trees also served as a clear demarcation between the blessed lands of Valinor and the outer darkness where Melkor still roamed. Their light protected Valinor, keeping it pure and untouched for a long time. It was an era of peace and flourishing, a golden age in every sense of the word, sustained by the radiant, cyclical light of Telperion and Laurelin. This idyllic period was destined to be challenged, of course, as all good things are, but for a time, the 2 trees stood as the magnificent heart of a truly divine creation. The world, now bathed in the gentle, cycling light of the 2 trees, remained largely empty of sentient life for a long time. The Valar, in their wisdom, knew that the children of Ilúvatar were destined to arrive, but for ages, Arda was their garden alone. Then, by the quiet waters of Cuvi Nen, the water of awakening, something truly miraculous happened. The firstborn, the elves, awoke. You can imagine the scene, a stillness in the ancient forests, a hush over the land, and then, as if the very trees themselves sighed into existence, the first elves slowly opened their eyes. They were born under the starlit sky, before the sun or moon had ever risen, and thus they forever held a deep love for the stars. They were beautiful beings, tall and graceful, with keen senses and a natural affinity for music and artistry. Unlike men, who would come later, the elves were immortal, bound to the life of Arda itself. They would not die of old age or sickness, though they could be slain or waste away from grief. Their existence was a delicate balance of deep joy and profound sorrow, as they were destined to witness the changing world for countless ages. It's a bit like being invited to a party that never ends, but you know some of your favorite people will eventually leave, and you'll just have to deal with it. Talk about a commitment. The Valar, sensing the awakening of the elves, rejoiced greatly, for these were the first of the children of Ilúvatar, for whom all their labors had been intended. Orm, the great hunter of the Valar, was the first to discover them. He found them living simply near their awakening place, still innocent of the greater world and the shadow of Melkor. He was greatly saddened by what he saw, knowing that Melkor had already begun to spread his corrupting influence in the outer regions of Middle-earth, capturing some of the early elves and twisting them into horrible shapes. This knowledge spurred the Valar to action. They resolved to wage war against Melkor, to protect their beloved children. After a long and terrible war, known as the Battle of the Powers, Melkor was finally overthrown and imprisoned. The Valar then called upon the elves to journey with them to the blessed realm of Valinor, a land of perfect light and peace, safe from all harm. This was a momentous decision, and not all elves chose to go. Some, who loved the freedom of the wide world under the stars more than the light of Valinor, refused the call. These were the Avari, the unwilling. But the majority, curious and awestruck by the majesty of the Valar, chose to follow. This long and arduous journey across Middle-earth towards the west was known as the Great March. You can picture them marching across vast plains, climbing over towering mountains, and sailing across wide rivers, always guided by the light of Orum's torch. It was a journey of immense wonder and hardship, and along the way, some groups of elves again chose to linger, falling in love with certain lands or finding their own paths. These became the Sindar, the Grey Elves, who settled in Beleriand, and other groups who remained in Middle-earth. But the main body, the Eldar, pressed on, driven by the desire to see the light of the two trees and to live in the undimmed glory of Valinor. This journey shaped them deeply, influencing their culture, their songs, and their longing for the light. It was essentially the first great road trip, only with much more walking and far fewer roadside diners. Finally, after ages of travel, the Eldar arrived at the shores of the Great Sea, where Ulmo, the Lord of Waters, ferried them across to Valinor. There, under the pure, golden and silver light of Lorelin and Telperion, they built their cities, learned new crafts from the Valar, and flourished in an age of unparalleled peace and beauty. This was their golden age, a time of profound joy and artistry, where their skills and knowledge grew beyond imagining, setting the stage for some truly magnificent creations. In the blessed realm of Valinor, bathed in the radiant glow of the two trees, the elves flourished, especially the Noldor, a clan renowned for their skill and craftsmanship. Among them lived Anor, the most gifted and arguably the most volatile of all the elves. His hands, guided by an unmatched brilliance, could shape anything, but his heart, it seemed, was often shaped by fierce pride and an almost obsessive possessiveness. Anor's greatest creation was the Silmarils. Imagine jewels unlike any ever seen, not just beautiful, but alive with light. He captured the mingled essence of the two trees, Telperion and Lorelin, and imprisoned it within 3 magnificent gems. Each Silmaril glowed with an inner fire, containing the pure, undimmed light of Valinor itself. They were more than mere jewels. They were living embodiments of the world's most precious light, objects of unparalleled beauty and power. Anor worked tirelessly, pouring his genius and a significant part of his own spirit into their making. You could say he was the ultimate overachiever, always needing to outdo himself, much like that one friend who insists on baking a 7-tier cake for a casual Tuesday gathering. His possessive nature, however, was as bright as the Silmarils themselves. He loved these jewels more than anything else, guarding them fiercely, even against the Valar, who had helped create the light within them. He began to distrust everyone, seeing potential threats to his treasures in every glance, every whisper. This fierce protectiveness, born of his intense creative drive, soon turned into a crippling paranoia. You know how it is when you're really proud of something you've made. Now imagine that feeling cranked up to 1,000 with cosmic consequences. The Valar, recognizing the immense power and sacredness of the Silmarils, requested that Anor show them, perhaps even allow them to be used for the greater good of Valinor. But Anor refused, his heart already poisoned by suspicion and the fear of loss. He hoarded his creations, keeping them hidden away, the light of the world trapped within his personal vault. This refusal marked a critical turning point, a clear sign of his growing darkness. It was a bit like asking a dragon to share its gold. You know the answer before you even open your mouth. Unbeknownst to Fëanor, Melkor, now known as Morgoth after his escape and renewed malice, coveted the Silmarils above all other things. The light of the two trees reminded him of his own inability to create life and beauty, only to corrupt and destroy. The Silmarils, pure and perfect, were a direct affront to his darkness. He saw them as the ultimate prize, a way to further mock and defy the Valar. He plotted endlessly, stirring up discontent and lies among the Noldor, sowing seeds of doubt and resentment against the Valar, all to get his grasping hands on those dazzling gems. His insidious whispers amplified Fëanor's already growing paranoia, making him believe that everyone, even his own kin, was plotting against him. The creation of the Silmarils, while a magnificent artistic triumph, paradoxically became the catalyst for immense sorrow and conflict. Their beauty drew the attention of both the forces of light and the forces of darkness, setting the stage for a cosmic struggle that would define an entire age of Middle-earth. Fëanor's unchecked pride and his obsessive love for his own creations, while understandable in a way, ultimately paved the path for tragedy, like trying to protect something so tightly that you accidentally crush it. In the immediate aftermath of the first kinslaying, as the blood of kin dried on the shores of Alqualand and the seas swam, ships prepared to set sail for Middle-earth, a profound and terrible shadow fell upon the Noldor. This shadow was the doom of Mandos, a prophecy of suffering and sorrow uttered by the Valar. Mandos, also known as Enmo, the judge of the dead. He was one of the mightiest of the Valar, the keeper of the halls of Mandos where the spirits of the dead awaited their fates. His pronouncements were not curses born of malice, but solemn truths unchangeable and inevitable, like the slow grind of cosmic gears. You can almost feel the chill in the air as Fëanor and his rebellious host, having committed the unthinkable crime of kinslaying, stood on the precipice of their departure. Mandos appeared before them, a figure of immense solemnity and unwavering justice, and spoke words that would forever echo through their history. He foretold their bitter fate, that they would pursue the stolen Silmarils in vain, finding no lasting joy or peace. He declared that though they sought to escape Morgoth, they would forever be bound by his shadow. He warned them that their sworn oaths, while noble in intent, would betray them, causing endless strife and sorrow among themselves. It was a bleak forecast, a bit like a medieval weather report predicting eternal winter, with no chance of a warm fire. The prophecy also spoke of the land they were going to, Beleriand, a beautiful but doomed region of Middle-earth. It decreed that all who dwelt there, both Noldor and their allies among men, would fall under the shadow of death and sorrow. Their efforts against Morgoth, while heroic, would ultimately end in ruin and the loss of their lands. It was a brutal truth. They were marching into a war they could not truly win, only endure at immense cost. This wasn't a punishment meant to break their spirits, but a grim warning about the inherent consequences of their rebellion and the terrible weight of their actions. Despite the dire warning, Fëanor and many of his followers, blinded by their pride and their burning desire for vengeance, pressed on. They believed their strength and resolve would overcome any fate, or perhaps they simply felt that their path was already chosen, and there was no turning back. You can almost see the stubborn set in their eyes, the desperate hope mixed with a fatalistic resolve. It's the kind of stubbornness that makes you both admire and despair for someone, like watching a friend insist on wearing sandals in a snowstorm. Some of the Noldor, however, heeded the warning of Mandos and turned back, choosing to remain in Valinor, albeit forever marked by the choices of their kin. The doom of Mandos was not merely a prophecy. It was a cosmic decree, a statement of immutable law. It set the stage for all the tragic tales of the First Age, the long sieges, the heroic but doomed quests, the betrayals, and the endless suffering. Every heartbreak, Every lost battle, every bitter internal conflict among the elves would later be seen as a fulfillment of Mandos's words. It hung over them like a permanent dark cloud, a constant reminder that their journey to Middle-earth was not just an expedition of war, but a long, agonizing penance for the bloodshed in Valinor. This was a narrative arc already written, and the Noldor were merely playing out their part in a grand, sorrowful opera. With the doom of Mandos echoing behind them, and the taste of kinslaying still bitter on their tongues, the Noldor arrived in Middle-earth, specifically the lands of Beleriand, a beautiful but wild region in the northwest. Their goal to wage war against Morgoth and reclaim the Silmarils. This was not a quick skirmish, it was a long vigil, a period of endless struggle, marked by vast sieges and countless battles against the Dark Lord's ever-growing power. You can imagine the scene: a land of rolling hills, ancient forests, and winding rivers, slowly becoming a battlefield. The air, once pure, grew heavy with the scent of smoke and fear, a constant reminder of the war that dominated their lives. The Noldor, with their superior weaponry forged in the light of Valinor, and their fiery determination, initially had some successes. They established mighty strongholds and hidden cities deep in the mountains or concealed within forests. The most famous of these was Angband, Morgoth's immense fortress, which the Noldor laid siege to for centuries. Imagine a fortress so vast and so deeply rooted that it seemed to be part of the very earth, its dark towers scraping against the angry sky. For nearly 400 years, the Noldor held their ground, their armies standing guard, preventing Morgoth's forces from spreading freely across Beleriand. It was a monumental effort, a testament to their strength and unwavering resolve, like trying to hold back an entire ocean with a very large bucket. But Morgoth was cunning and patient. He unleashed new horrors from the depths of Angband Balrogs. Terrible fiery demons, orcs, twisted mockeries of elves, and other foul creatures, each one a product of his malice. The sieges were not static affairs. They were punctuated by sudden, brutal assaults from Morgoth, who would send out vast armies from his fortress, testing the Noldor's defenses and sowing terror. The elves fought valiantly, their shining blades and their indomitable spirits clashing against the dark hordes. The land itself bore witness to this endless conflict, scarred by craters and choked with ash from the constant battles. The scale of the war was immense, affecting not just the Noldor, but also the Sindar, the Grey Elves who had chosen to remain in Middle-earth, and the newly awakened men who arrived in Beleriand some centuries later. All were drawn into the desperate struggle against Morgoth. Alliances were formed, sometimes uneasy, between different elven houses and between elves and men, as they recognized that only together could they stand a chance against the overwhelming darkness. But even with their combined strength, the war was a draining, relentless affair, filled with more losses than victories. It was a war of attrition, where every small gain felt like a huge victory, and every loss felt like the end of the world. Through these long centuries, the Noldor suffered greatly, fulfilling the doom of Mandos. Their strength waned, their numbers dwindled, and their once bright spirits became heavy with sorrow and weariness. They fought not for conquest, but for survival, and for a faint hope of reclaiming the light of the Silmarils that had brought them so much pain. The enduring nature of this struggle, this long vigil against an overwhelming evil, would define the first age of Middle-earth, setting the stage for future conflicts and demonstrating the immense cost of defiance and vengeance. It was the longest, most depressing neighborhood watch program in history. Only the bad guys were actual fiery demons, and the watch involved a lot more sword fighting. As the long vigil against Morgoth dragged on, new and terrifying horrors began to emerge from the depths of Angband, his vast and terrible fortress. Among the most dreadful of these were the great dragons, monstrous creatures born of Morgoth's malice and fire, unleashed upon Beleriand as ultimate weapons of destruction. You can almost feel the ground tremble as these colossal beasts, unlike anything the elves had ever seen, burst forth into the world. They were not merely large, they were living engines of war, breathing fire and shattering strongholds with their immense power. The first and most infamous of these was Glorung, often called the Great Worm or the Golden. He was the father of dragons, the first of the Urul-ki, or fire, drakes, to be bred by Morgoth. Imagine a creature of immense size, covered in golden scales, with a cunning mind and a voice that could weave spells of illusion and despair. Glorung first appeared during the Dagor Bragalach, the Battle of Sudden Flame, breaking the Noldor's long siege of Angband and spreading terror across the lands. His coming was a turning point, a grim reminder of Morgoth's unending capacity for evil and his mastery over corrupted life. He burned forests, withered plains, and caused rivers to boil, his fiery breath leaving ruin in its wake, like a really angry, giant lizard with a terrible case of indigestion. Glorung was no mindless beast. He possessed a dark intelligence, capable of speech and trickery, and he reveled in the despair he caused. He was used by Morgoth to break the spirits of the elves and men, to sow distrust and fear among them. His presence alone was often enough to turn the tide of a battle, his sheer size and power overwhelming any who dared to stand against him. You can almost hear the terrified screams mixed with the roar of his flames as he swept across the land, a terrifying harbinger of ruin. He managed to confuse and lead astray mighty heroes, even affecting the fate of Turin Turambar, whose story is intertwined with Glorung's destructive path. It's hard to imagine being a soldier and looking up to see that flying towards you. You'd probably instantly recall every single bad decision you'd ever made. Later in the First Age, as the war reached its terrible climax, Morgoth unleashed an even greater terror, the Wind Dragons. The greatest of these was Ancalagon the Black, the most powerful of all the dragons, and the first to fly. Imagine a creature so immense that its shadow could cover entire mountains, and its fiery breath was hotter and more destructive than any that came before. Ancalagon led a host of other winged dragons in the War of Wrath, a final desperate attempt by Morgoth to secure his dominion. Their appearance was so sudden and devastating that they almost drove back the host of the Valar itself. It was a truly terrifying sight, like watching a fleet of flying volcanoes suddenly descend from the sky, spewing liquid fire. The dragons represented Morgoth's ultimate weapon, a twisted parody of the glorious creations of the Valar. They embodied his destructive will, his desire to dominate and consume all life with fire and malice. Their very existence was a challenge to the natural order, a perversion of life itself. They added a new, horrifying dimension to the conflict, turning battles into infernos and leaving behind landscapes of ash and desolation. Even seasoned warriors, who had faced countless orcs and balrogs, quailed before the might of these winged beasts. It was like dealing with a regular bad guy, and then suddenly he brings out a rocket launcher that also breathes fire and can fly. Unfair much. The tales of the great dragons became legends whispered in hushed tones, cautionary tales of overwhelming power and destructive fury. They marked the darkest days of the First Age, embodying the sheer terror and despair that Morgoth was capable of inflicting upon the world. Their emergence signaled a new level of threat, pushing the forces of light to their very limits, and demanding acts of heroism and sacrifice on an unprecedented scale. These were not just creatures, they were living embodiments of absolute, unyielding dread, truly the stuff of nightmares. Even amidst the overwhelming darkness brought by Morgoth and his terrifying dragons, the First Age of Middle-earth was not solely a tale of despair. It was also an age lit by flashes of incredible bravery and profound sacrifice, where both elves and men rose to perform deeds that would echo through history as legends. You witness these acts of courage, shining brightly against the encroaching shadow. These were not always grand battles of armies, but often personal struggles, driven by love, loyalty, and a desperate hope against impossible odds. Perhaps the most famous of these heroic deeds is the tale of Beren and Elthëin. Beren was a mortal man, and Elthëin was an elf, a princess of the Sindar, whose beauty and grace were unmatched. Their love story was already extraordinary, But it became truly legendary when Beren was tasked with a seemingly impossible quest to recover a Silmaril from Morgoth's Iron Crown in Angband. You can almost feel the chill from the fortress, its vast and terrible form looming like a mountain of pure evil. To even approach it was madness, let alone to steal from the crown of the Dark Lord himself. Their journey was fraught with peril, facing monstrous wolves, dark magic, and the oppressive dread of Morgoth's realm. Yet Elthien, with her incredible magical powers, particularly her enchanting voice and her mastery of illusion, managed to charm even Morgoth himself for a fleeting moment. She danced and sang before his throne, weaving a spell of sleep over the Dark Lord and his court. This allowed Beren to approach the throne and, with a knife, cut a single Silmaril from Morgoth's crown. Imagine the sheer audacity, robbing the most powerful evil in the world of his most prized possession, while he snored on his dark throne. It's the kind of stunt that makes you think. Well, that wasn't in the job description. Another epic act of heroism was the defiance of Echurin, a man of Dor lo Min. Captured by Morgoth in battle, Hashurin refused to reveal the location of the hidden elven kingdom of Gondolin, even under torture. Morgoth, enraged by Echurin's unbreakable will, cursed him and his entire family, forcing Echurin to watch, through Morgoth's own eyes, the slow ruin and despair that would befall his children, Titurin and Nienna. Echurin endured this torment for years, his spirit unbroken, a silent, defiant challenge to the Dark Lord's power. It was a test of endurance beyond anything imaginable, proving that even a single mortal spirit could stand against ultimate evil, though it cost him everything. There were countless other acts of bravery. Fingolfin, the High King of the Noldor, in a moment of despair and fury, rode alone to the very gates of Angband and challenged Morgoth to single combat. He fought the Dark Lord, scouring him 7 times, a feat of incredible courage, though he eventually fell. His defiance, a bright spark against overwhelming darkness, inspired hope in his people, a reminder that even against despair, one could choose to fight. These acts, whether it was a warrior's last stand or a hidden act of kindness, were not just stories. They were the very fabric of hope that kept the spirit of resistance alive in a world constantly besieged by shadow. They were the small miracles that prevented the complete triumph of darkness, proving that even the smallest flame can sometimes hold back the vastest night. Amidst the long, desperate wars against Morgoth in Beleriand, one of the most enduring symbols of elvish hope and defiance was the hidden city of Gondolin. Imagine a city of unparalleled beauty and craftsmanship, built in secret high in the encircling mountains, shielded by a ring of treacherous peaks and a magical veil of mist. You would only find it if its founder, Turgon, King of Gondolin, allowed it. For nearly 4 centuries, it stood untouched by Morgoth's forces, a beacon of light in a darkening world, a place where the Noldor could practice their arts in peace, and even dream of a future free from shadow. Its very existence was a constant source of frustration for Morgoth, like a persistent itch he just couldn't scratch. The city itself was a marvel built of white stone, with walls so high and smooth they seemed to merge with the mountains around them. Its 7 gates, each more intricately designed and strongly guarded than the last, led through a labyrinth of tunnels and secret passages, ensuring its absolute secrecy. The streets were broad and paved, lined with elegant houses, and at its heart rose the Tower of the King, shining white against the deep blue sky. The Noldor of Gondolin poured all their skill into its creation, crafting weapons, armor, and beautiful works of art. You could say it was the ancient equivalent of a heavily fortified luxury resort, only instead of spa treatments, they focused on blacksmithing and magic. But even the most hidden places are not immune to the relentless malice of a truly determined enemy. The fall of Gondolin was one of the most tragic and dramatic events of the First Age, a devastating blow to the hopes of elves and men alike. Its secret was ultimately betrayed by Maeglin, a Noldorin elf who, consumed by pride and a twisted desire for Turgon's daughter, Idril, revealed the city's location to Morgoth. This betrayal, a dark stain on the honor of the Noldor, allowed Morgoth to plan his attack with precision, like someone leaving the back door open for a very unwelcome guest. Morgoth gathered his mightiest forces for the assault Balrogs, with their whips of flame, packs of monstrous wolves, legions of orcs, and, most terrifyingly, his newly unleashed dragons, including the fearsome Glorong. The attack came suddenly, a massive, overwhelming wave of darkness pouring through the mountains, breaking through the seemingly impenetrable defenses. You can picture the horror of the beautiful city, once so quiet and serene, now filled with the roar of dragons, the screams of the dying, and the clash of steel. The sky would have been blotted out by smoke and fire, and the ground would have trembled under the tread of countless monstrous feet. The elves of Gondolin fought with incredible bravery and desperation, defending their city to the last breath. Their shining mail and keen blades clashed against the overwhelming tide of shadow, but it was a losing battle. The power of Morgoth's dragons and Balrogs proved too great. Temples collapsed, towers crumbled, and the beautiful white stone of the city was scorched and stained with black. Many perished in the inferno, elves of great skill and noble spirit, their dreams of peace turning to ash. It was a truly heartbreaking end to such a magnificent place, like watching your meticulously built sandcastle get swept away by a giant, fiery wave. Only a small remnant of the people of Gondolin managed to escape the destruction, fleeing through a secret passage into the chaos of Middle-earth. The fall of Gondolin marked the near-total triumph of Morgoth in Beleriand, leaving few strongholds of light remaining and pushing the elves and men to the brink of utter defeat. As the First Age plunged into its deepest despair, with Morgoth seemingly triumphant and the last strongholds of elves and men falling, a single, desperate hope emerged from the ruins, the voyage of Eärendil. He was a half-elf, a descendant of both men and elves, bearing the lineage of great heroes and the heavy burden of his people's suffering. You see him standing on the desolate shores of Middle-earth, looking out across the vast dark ocean, knowing that the fate of two races rested on his shoulders. This was a mission of absolute necessity, a final, almost impossible gamble. Eärendil's journey was unlike any other. He built a ship, Vingelet, of unmatched beauty and strength, fashioned from the white timbers of the sacred tree Celeborn and a mast of silver. Into this ship, he placed the most precious and powerful of all jewels, the Silmaril that Beren and Lothain had recovered from Morgoth's crown. This Silmaril, now worn upon his brow, became his guiding star, shining with the pure light of the two trees, a direct challenge to the darkness that Morgoth had spread across the world. It's like bringing a single, impossibly bright flashlight to the darkest dungeon imaginable, hoping it will somehow banish all the monsters. His goal was audacious: to sail the Great Sea, a vast and often treacherous expanse of water, and reach Valinor, the blessed realm of the Valar. This was forbidden territory, for after the Noldor's rebellion and the kinslaying, the Valar had veiled Valinor from mortal eyes, making it inaccessible to all save those few allowed to pass. The journey itself was a perilous odyssey, fraught with terrible storms, monstrous creatures of the deep, and the very immensity of the ocean that seemed to stretch into endless nothingness. You can imagine the relentless waves, the biting winds, and the utter loneliness of such a voyage, with only the distant stars and the radiant Silmaril for company. He probably had some very long conversations with himself, and possibly the ship, about whether this was truly a good idea. But Eärendil was driven by a desperate, unwavering hope. He sailed not for vengeance or glory, but as an emissary for all the free peoples of Middle-earth, to plead for aid from the Valar. He carried their sorrow, their suffering, and their last glimmer of hope. He sought the forgiveness of the Valar for the Noldor's rebellion, and begged for their intervention against Morgoth, whose power had grown so vast it threatened to consume all of Arda. His was a plea born of profound despair, a recognition that the strength of elves and men alone was no longer enough to withstand the Dark Lord. After many long and perilous months, by the grace of Ulmo, Lord of Waters, and the guiding light of the Silmaril, Eärendil finally reached the shores of Valinor. You can imagine the sight, the blessed land, shining with a light unseen in Middle-earth for ages, welcoming the weary traveler. He was the first mortal man to set foot in Valinor, a testament to the sheer magnitude of his quest. Once there, he delivered his desperate plea before the Valar, laying bare the suffering of Middle-earth and the terror of Morgoth's tyranny. His words, infused with the weight of ages of sorrow and the flickering flame of hope, moved the mighty powers of the world, setting in motion the ultimate confrontation that would decide the fate of all creation. His dramatic arrival, a lone figure with a shining jewel on his brow, was like a cosmic emergency broadcast, finally getting through to the universe's busiest administrators. Eärendil's desperate plea before the Valar and Valinor did not fall on deaf ears. Moved by the suffering of elves and men, and by the sheer audacity of Eärendil's voyage, the mighty powers of the world finally resolved to intervene directly against Morgoth. This ultimate confrontation became known as the War of Wrath, a conflict of such immense scale and power that it reshaped the very face of Middle-earth. You witnessed the gathering of forces, a sight of awe, inspiring might, as the Valar, the great spirits of the world, prepared for battle. Led by Manarg, the king of the Valar, and joined by all the other Valar except for the grieving Mandos and the sea-loving Ulmo who chose to remain on the Seed, a vast host was assembled. This was not merely an army. It was a divine force, consisting of the Maiar who had remained in Valinor, and those elves who had not participated in the kinslaying, particularly the Vanyar, the most beautiful and radiant of the elves. You can imagine them, clad in shining armor, their banners unfurling in the pure light of Valinor, a stark contrast to the shadowy legions of Morgoth. It was a mobilization of celestial power, like watching all the stars in the sky suddenly coalesce into a single, unstoppable army. The host of the Valar crossed the Great Sea, arriving in Middle-earth with a might that dwarfed any conflict seen before. They brought with them not just warriors, but the very essence of their power, shaking the foundations of the land. Morgoth, for his part, unleashed his ultimate weapon in a desperate bid to turn the tide, his newly bred winged dragons, led by the fearsome Ancalagon the Black, the largest and most terrible of all dragons. These flying beasts, breathing fire and casting vast shadows, were so devastating that they initially drove back the host of the Valar, causing immense destruction and despair. It was a terrifying moment, like watching a swarm of flying volcanoes suddenly descend from the sky. But Eärendil, now bearing the Silmaril upon his brow, soared through the sky in his ship Vingelet, transformed into a living star. He was joined by the great eagles, led by Thorondor, their ancient king. In an epic aerial battle, Eärendil and the eagles fought against Ancalagon and the dragon host. The clash was titanic, filling the heavens with light and fire, until finally, Eärendil cast down Ancalagon, whose fall shattered the very mountains of Thangorodrim, the towering peaks above Angband. This decisive victory broke the power of the dragons and turned the tide of the war. With the dragons defeated, the host of the Valar pressed their attack upon Angband, shattering its formidable defenses and delving into its deepest pits. Morgoth, now stripped of his greatest weapon, was utterly defeated. His Balrogs were slain or fled, his orcs were scattered, and his vast underground realms were broken apart. Morgoth himself was captured, bound with the chain Angaina, which Ald had forged, and his iron crown was removed. This time there was no escape for the Dark Lord. He was thrust through the door of night into the timeless void, utterly removed from the circles of the world. It was a triumph of light over shadow, a victory of cosmic proportions, finally ending the long torment that had plagued Middle-earth for so many ages. The War of Wrath, that colossal struggle against Morgoth, finally brought an end to the long torment of the First Age, but its victory came at a terrible cost, fundamentally reshaping the world. You stand amidst the aftermath, a landscape utterly transformed, a testament to the immense power unleashed in the conflict. What was once the beautiful land of Beleriand, with its towering mountains, deep forests, and winding rivers, was shattered and largely consumed by the Great Sea. It was a cataclysmic event, as if the very bones of the earth had fractured under the strain of divine warfare. Imagine the sheer force of it: mountains collapsing, valleys being torn open, and vast plains sinking beneath the churning waves. The land that had borne witness to so much heroism and suffering simply ceased to exist, swallowed by the ocean in a cosmic act of geological rearrangement. The Noldor, who had fought and bled for centuries to defend Beleriand, now saw their homes, their cities, and their histories vanish beneath the water. It was a mournful sight, a profound sense of loss for all who had known and loved that land. You can almost hear the echoes of their sorrow, carried on the salt-laced wind, as they witnessed the complete disappearance of their ancient realm. The devastation wasn't just geographical, it was also environmental. The air was thick with dust and ash from the prolonged battles, and the very climate of Middle-earth shifted. The sun, which had risen for the first time only a few centuries before, now shone on a world scarred by ruin and forever changed. The lands to the east of Beleriand, which would later become the focus of many tales, were also affected, though less directly. They received a deluge of refugees, both elves and men, who had managed to escape the sinking lands, carrying with them their grief, their memories, and the hard-won lessons of their long war. It was a mass migration on a scale never before seen, like an entire population suddenly realizing their neighborhood had decided to become an underwater feature. The victory over Morgoth, while absolute, left a bitter taste in the mouths of many. So much was lost, so many lives extinguished, so much beauty undone. The few remaining elven realms in Middle-earth were now isolated, their strength diminished, their numbers greatly reduced. Men who had proven their courage in the war were now scattered and dispossessed, facing a harsh new reality in a world without Beleriand. The hope that Eadrendil had carried to Valinor had indeed brought salvation, but it was a salvation that demanded an unthinkable sacrifice from the world itself. You look upon this ruined landscape and understand that history is rarely a simple triumph. The removal of Morgoth, the ultimate evil, should have brought peace, but the scars of his malice and the immense cost of his defeat remained. The world was now emptier, quieter, and forever altered. It was a stark reminder that even the greatest victories leave deep marks, and that sometimes winning simply means surviving. The stage was cleared, not for a fresh start, but for a new chapter, one that would carry the weight of the past into an uncertain future. Even with Morgoth, the prime Dark Lord, banished into the outer void, the victory of the War of Wrath did not usher in an era of perfect peace. Far from it. The world, scarred and transformed, still held lingering shadows of his immense malice, and a new, insidious evil was already beginning to stir. You sense this residual darkness, a subtle corruption that seeped into the very ground and whispered on the winds, a constant reminder that evil, once unleashed, is rarely truly gone. It's like cleaning a very old, very moldy house. You can scrub all you want, but some of the spores are probably still lurking in the corners. This lingering evil manifested most notably in the form of Sauron, one of the Maiar who had served Morgoth. Sauron, unlike his former master, was not driven by a desire to utterly corrupt and destroy Arda, but to order and control it, to bring all things under his singular will. While Morgoth scattered his power into the very fabric of the world, making it inherently dark, Sauron gathered power to himself, seeking to dominate others directly. He was a master of deception, a cunning strategist, and a sorcerer of immense skill. His methods were more subtle than Morgoth's raw destruction, preferring manipulation and coercion over outright war in the beginning. After the defeat and banishment of Morgoth, Sauron initially feigned repentance, but his true nature soon reasserted itself. He retreated to the lands of the east, far from the direct influence of the Valar, and began to secretly consolidate his power. He learned from Morgoth's mistakes, understanding that Morgoth's overt acts of destruction and his direct confrontations with the Valar had ultimately led to his defeat. Sauron, therefore, adopted a more patient and deceptive approach, choosing to work from the shadows, twisting hearts and minds rather than shattering mountains. His influence began to spread like a creeping shadow, particularly in the regions that would one day be known as Eriador, and most famously, the Dark Land of Mordor. The devastation of Beleriand, which had sunk beneath the waves, created a vast, empty canvas, a spiritual and physical vacuum that Sauron was all too eager to fill with his dark design. He was no longer the crude brute of the First Age, but a sophisticated schemer, a master of dark arts and manipulation. He sought not merely to dominate, but to impose a rigid, iron order on the world, twisting its natural beauty into something controlled and cold. Imagine a tyrannical gardener who wants every flower to bloom in the exact same way, and if it doesn't, he just replaces it with a metal one. This quiet rebuilding of power marked the beginning of the Second Age, a period that would initially seem peaceful to many of the inhabitants of Middle-earth. The elves, exhausted by the long wars, focused on healing and rebuilding their scattered realms, while men began to establish new kingdoms, largely unaware of the new threat slowly rising in the east. But the seeds of future conflict were already deeply sown, rooted in Sauron's patient malevolence. The memory of Morgoth remained a deep scar on the land, a constant reminder of the darkness that could consume everything. Sauron's true genius lay in his ability to appear benevolent, to offer gifts and knowledge that would slowly, insidiously, lead to his ultimate control. He would approach various peoples, especially the elves and men, offering his aid in rebuilding the world, presenting himself as a bringer of order and enlightenment. This deceptive front would eventually lead to the forging of the Rings of Power, the very instruments through which he hoped to bind all free wills to his own, a plan so cunning it could only have been born from a truly evil mind. The world, exhausted by the past, was not prepared for such a subtle, charming form of darkness, and thus the stage was set for some of the most epic betrayals and battles to come.